Good morning, Rochester. You are listening to 100.9 WXIR. This is Evidence of Design. I'm Matt Treadwell. Jason's not in the studio today. He quit the show. He quit his job. He got kicked out of his house by his dad last night and showed up at my place and was like, Matt, I need a place to spend the night. And I was like, you can't stay here.
Wow, he's going to be thrilled to hear this.
None of that was true. But Jason is unfortunately not here today, but that's okay. It's the Matt and Mary hour.
Woohoo!
Or the Mary and Matt hour.
The M hour. How about that?
Double M.
Then we both get our glory.
No longer will we hide in the shadows while Jason just prattles on about neoliberalism and wealth inequality. Instead,
we'll come into the light and prattle on about neoliberalism and wealth inequality.
Don't let them know.
No, we'll be talking about some good things today. Our show today is about change. And no, we're not talking about the nickels and dimes in your pockets, although those may come into it as well. We're talking about witnessing change, the shifts in the way that we live our lives and interact with the natural world and with each other. We're going to talk change with a capital C, political change and climate change. Sometimes these feel more like concepts that we sort of can't reach or something very far away and abstract, but they are things that affect our lives, even here in Rochester, New York. And so what we want to talk about today is how those affect us as citizens of this wonderful town with a river.
And we have a wide variety of topics today, don't we, Mary?
A very wide variety of topics, we sure do.
Hopefully we can tie it all together. What are some of the things we're talking about?
So we, as I mentioned, political and climate change are the two sort of big things. So we're going to be talking about some of the seats up for election in the primaries on June 25th, which I might remind you is this week.
Tuesday,
so make
right?
sure you get to, I honestly don't know what date today is. So, sure.
It is Tuesday.
Okay, then Tuesday, June 25th is the local primary. So make sure that if you are already registered with a party that has seats open, you do unfortunately have to be registered already at this point. So we're going to be talking about some of the seats that are open, some of the people who are running, just to give you and ourselves a bit more of an idea. We're also going to talk a little bit about climate change and how it affects Rochester. A few weeks ago, we talked about the ROC 2034 plan, or some points of it, and we'll kind of touch a little bit on that today. Not too much, but just a little bit. We'll also highlight a little bit the Green New Deal. For those of you who aren't aware of what it is, just an overview of what the Green New Deal is. And we also have a sort of special section today where there's a short story we're going to discuss. This time not written by either of us, but by an author, Debbie Urbanski, who is from the area, not from Rochester, but from central New York. And she has a very intriguing take on where climate change might lead us. So we're going to bring that into the show in our discussion of change. Now, Matt, where can people find us off the air?
If you want to participate in this discussion, you can first call in on the show, and the number is 585-219-8889. That's 585-219-8889. Give us a ring. Let us know what you think about everything that we're talking about. You can also send us an email at radioeod@gmail.com. You can contact us on Facebook or Twitter at radioeod. And you can find our past episodes on YouTube by searching Evidence of Design.
Just Evidence of Design, not EOD?
That's right.
All right. Well, that one's a bit of an anomaly, I guess.
Yeah,
but, I guess I should know. I did help come up with them, but in any case, if you do call in, just make sure to give me a little bit of patience. I'm the one on the phone today and have only done it once or twice. So if you don't get an answer right away, we'll be with you very soon.
Already a pro.
Sure. We're close. All right, I guess
we'll take it away.
If we've got our intro, yeah, might as well take it away.
song about the sunshine. That song is Health and Efficiency by the band This Heat.
I'm sorry, was that health inefficiency or health and efficiency?
And efficiency.
Oh, okay. That's a big difference.
Yes. Important to note.
Well, I'm glad it's a song about the sunshine because we are finally getting some of that after quite a bit of rain
Yeah.
in Rochester.
Summer's here. First day of summer.
Oh,
yesterday.
yeah, I guess literally it is. All right, well, with the summer, I guess, well, this isn't actually. With the summer comes new political candidates.
Yes. With the summer comes change.
The natural.
Rejuvenation and disappointment.
We can get into that with our talk of a slow decline later on. But right now we're hoping that change might be good change.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of open seats up for election in this coming season. So the first thing that we'd like to touch on today is the primaries. As I mentioned, they're coming up on Tuesday, which I now know that it's Tuesday, June 25th for all seats in Monroe County. This is, again, just the primary election. The general election will happen in November. So for the primary, you do already need to be registered with a party, and you can only vote in that party's primary. The polls will be open on Tuesday from 12 noon to 9 p.m. In November, they will be open much longer, so don't worry too much about that. But on Tuesday, it'll be 12 to 9.
Okay.
Just a quick question. Do you know any of the seats that are open?
I have no idea.
Okay. Well,
I'm
let
the
me
best,
tell you.
right?
It's all right. I only know because I looked them up.
Yeah.
So seats that are open this election are county executive, county legislators, the Rochester City Council, Rochester School Board, and City Court. There are some other ones, but those I think are the big ones. And City Newspaper ran an issue just last week on voting. It's a really wonderful resource if you're trying to get an idea of who is up for the primary seats. We actually are using it a little bit today just to give ourselves a reminder of who's up for election. So we'll just give a quick run through. Hopefully you've heard some of the names before, but just who's up for what district in case you haven't gotten a chance to do that. So legislature candidates, these are by district, so certain parts of the city. Up for the 13th district, which is Henrietta Pittsford, there's Michael Udelson and Terry Steg. I don't know if that's how you pronounce the last name. It's S-T-E-G. Kind of reminds me of a stag, but Steg. For 21st district, North Winton Village, Beechwood, and Bensonhurst, we have Victor Sanchez and Rachel Barnhart.
Yeah.
Which I think you mentioned that you've heard of her before.
Well, she's ran in a couple of elections. She ran for Louise Slaughter's seat last year against Joe Morelli. And,
oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I think she ran for something else a year or two before that as well. I can't remember right now off the top of my head, but
gotcha. And from what I read, she's pretty well known from being a television personality for quite a while.
Yeah.
And I guess against her, Victor Sanchez, I don't know him from a lot of things, but I actually did run into him at the Clean Sweep this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was working at the same site as me, which was kind of funny.
Did you talk to him?
Yeah, I got a chance to chat, but I didn't realize
who he was.
No, I had no idea
Yeah.
until at the end he mentioned it. But it was like, oh, that's
funny.
It was really pretty cool. He was a great worker, though, doing a great job at East High, cleaning up those gardens. So moving on for the 23rd district, which would be the Monroe Avenue, Park Avenue, Cobbs Hill, Browncroft, and a sliver, just a little bit of Brighton. There's actually 3 people up. So this is just the Democratic race. We have Linda Hasman, Scotty Gannett, and Todd Grady. So I think that's the only primary that has for the Democrats that has 3 people running for that spot. So they have been putting a lot of things in mailboxes. I know I live in that area, and we've been getting a lot of different flyers in our mailbox.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
And I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't know. But are these... so is all of Rochester able to participate in these primaries, or is it only based on where you live in the city?
That is actually a good question. I'm not completely sure. I know that you have to be in the specific party to vote.
Right.
I don't know if you have to live in that district. I think probably, because otherwise they would be trying to pull people from other districts, but I can't answer that for sure.
Okay. Something for us to look up at some point. Probably.
Yeah, probably sooner rather than later. Yeah, that's a good question. I guess we'll run through the rest of the districts and then we'll ruminate on that for a future show. Hopefully we'll know by November. We should make sure that we know. So that was the 23rd district. So again, that was the only one with 3 seats, or with 3 people running for the 1 seat. For the 25th district, which is High Falls, Cornhill, the Plymouth Exchange, and some parts of South Wedge, there's Montgomery Bryant and John Lightfoot. 26th district, which would be Charlotte, Maplewood, and parts of Gayson Grease. So up north near the lake, there's a couple names in here that I'm not sure how to pronounce as well. Tony McKeechee and Versha Roman. So those are, I think, running against so Tony McKeechee is an incumbent, and he actually got the seat as a Republican and then changed his party line while he was in that position. So there has been a little bit of controversy about that, which would be interesting to see how it plays out. And finally, 27th district, which is 19th ward and Dutchtown. So a little bit of the western part of the city. There's Ebony Dukes and Sabrina Lamar. So that is for the district races for legislature. Another race that is up that a lot of people have been talking about is for the school board. This is interesting in itself because we don't even know if the school board is going to exist. Actually, if there's going to be a state takeover of the Rochester City School District or not. So these people are running, with the hope of, again, the show being on change. They're running with the hopes of changing the school district for the better. A lot of them have children or did have children who graduated from city schools. And so they really have a lot of hope and a lot of desire to make a better change for the school district. So these people are running for 4 spots. There are 4 open spots on the school board. I know that there are a couple of other shows on air who have brought some school board candidates on. I know the Esquire Hour brought Ricardo Adams on the show last week, and I'm sure that there have been other people on air as well. So just as a quick listing, there is Ricardo Adams, Andrea Bryant, Judith Davis, Howard Eagle, Clifford Florence, Anthony Hall, Robert Hoggard, Beatrice LeBron, Amy Malloy, and Willa Powell, all up for those 4 seats. Some of them are running on a slate, so trying to get all the seats together. But again, should be an interesting race, and we'll even see if those seats are going to exist 6 months or a year from now, depending on what New York State decides.
I had no idea there was a possibility of a state takeover.
Yeah, so that's also something it's been talked about. Again, the city newspaper has been doing some coverage of it pretty consistently. Mm-hmm. Basically, it seems that we know that the school district is struggling for various reasons, and if they continue to struggle, and I think the mayor is behind or in support of this state takeover, it would generally mean that it would end up probably being a mayoral takeover. So the mayor would dissolve the school board for the time being. I don't know if that means that they would bring in a new school board or if there wouldn't be one for a time being. I'm not exactly sure what that would mean. But the existing school board would not exist for a few years while changes are made from the state level instead of a local community level. So there are a lot of people. I think everyone up for these 4 seats is against the state takeover, all hoping that they want to change Rochester from from the Rochester community, and they
Right.
don't want the state to come in, step in and take that power away.
Yeah, I'd be very curious to know what exactly a state takeover would entail, what that would look like. Maybe a future episode.
Yeah, I honestly don't know if it's happened before. I don't know if there has been state takeover in other cities. Rochester is obviously a pretty large area, a pretty major city within New York State. So even if it has happened on a smaller scale, I don't know if it would have ever happened on a mid-sized city level scale.
Yeah. Well, we should remind people that they are listening to 100.9 WXIR, listener-powered radio. This is Evidence of Design. I am your co-host, Matt, and your other co-host, Mary Lawrence.
He's not both of us. That's me.
Yeah, I realize now I just phrased that very strangely. You can participate in the show by calling us at 585-219-8889. That's 585-219-8889. You can email us at radioeod@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook or Twitter by using at radioeod. And you can find our previous episodes on Evidence of Design, or not on Evidence of Design, on YouTube by searching Evidence of Design, episode whatever. We have about 50 or some odd episodes on YouTube now.
I think last week, this week is either 56 or 57. So in any case, we have well over 50 episodes. I know that we have already done episode 55.
All that content just waiting for you to dive into.
Yes, you can listen to our voices that's a lot of hours, actually. That's more than 2 days worth.
Yeah.
Like nonstop. Man, imagine when we get to 72 episodes, then people can just
Marathon.
listen to us for 3 full days without sleeping.
I'm excited for that to happen.
Are you going to do it?
Am I going to do it? I can't listen to myself talk for that long.
Well, I guess that's kind of the point.
Yeah. We just talked about the Democratic candidates that are participating in this week's primary that's happening on Tuesday. Does the city newspaper go into the Republican candidates at all? Is that happening Tuesday as well?
It is. They do not.
Yeah.
There are just a couple, I think. I think some of the spots are actually only Democrats. I unfortunately don't know for sure. There is also one that I didn't mention. There's an independence party, not independent party, but independence party primary for the county executive. So this is a race between two people, again, who sort of, I think they talk about them finding sort of a loophole because the independence party often gets confused, understandably, for the independent party. I don't know very much about it, but it's there's two people running for a county executive under this little party, and their names are Adam Bello and Cheryl Dinolfo. One of them, so Bello is a Democrat, and Cheryl Dinolfo, who is the incumbent, is a Republican.
Okay.
Other than that, I'm not completely sure. But just as a reminder, if you are not currently registered in the Democratic Party for these particulars, but if you're not already registered in a party, then you won't be able to vote in this election. However, you can still change your registration for the general election in November. That deadline is October 11th.
Good to know.
I know. I actually have to do that. So,
Are you registered as independent? Or?
I'm not. I'm registered at the Green Party. So it's a nice thing to say, but not super effective in primary elections, obviously.
Yeah.
And unfortunately.
I don't know how I feel about that rule that you can only participate in a primary if you belong to that party.
I'm not a huge fan of it, but
a lot of states, I mean, I don't know about a lot, but I know there are states that don't do that.
Yeah, with open primaries. I don't exactly know how those work either, so maybe, again, something for for a future episode.
Yes.
Yeah, I would love to be able to not be registered with a major party and still be able to have a say. But for some people, I'm sure that sounds like an easy out.
Yeah.
But I guess we should maybe shift topics. So that was one
let's
kind
move on.
of change that you have a voice in. Again, voting is like one of our primary, I guess, uses as a civilian or as a citizen of the United States. It's one of our
I think it's
most important rights.
It could single-handedly be the most like effective thing that citizens can do to encourage change.
Not only encourage, but create.
Yes.
Yeah.
Effect.
Yes, affect change. All right. So I guess we should move on to a different kind of change, and this would be maybe one that we also have a responsibility to, but it feels a lot different than, putting a piece of paper in a box or in a machine or, however your locale votes. And this is climate change. We hear the term thrown around a lot, but what does it mean for us in the Rochester area? I think right now it might feel a lot more real, especially for the people at the lakefront. I mentioned the rain earlier. That's, now today not happening with this beautiful sunshine, but we did get a lot of rain for quite a while, and it has felt like an unseasonable spring. And there has been a lot of flooding.
Yes.
And we might even say that that is part of climate change, something that we're not expecting. So, a few weeks ago, we talked about the ROC 2034 plan.
We did.
And what did we talk about in that plan?
I recall Jason talking about education, I think. I specifically took a quick look at the sort of plans to both I'm trying to think of the words that they used because they were very specific.
Usually revitalize ends up in those plans quite a bit.
Yeah. I specifically looked at the plans for climate change, and they in the plan they describe two different methods of dealing with climate change. One is, I think, adaptation, which is like just sort of bracing for the inevitability of change that we're going to have to make.
I guess one of those would be probably learning to deal with this flooding, for example.
Right. So there's cutting down on greenhouse gases, which would be like switching over to more clean energy sources like wind, solar, etc., hydropower. And then there's adaptation, which is like for example, coastal cities, the water level is rising and people will just have to probably move. They will become uninhabitable.
So we'll have climate refugees,
Yeah.
you're saying, who would probably come farther north, like here,
Possibly.
for example.
Yeah.
Or who could, I guess. So the plan covers a number of things. As we mentioned a few weeks ago, it's broken really nicely down on the webpage. And the section that we're looking at to talk about climate change or green spaces in general is called Sustaining Green and Active Systems. I really, really like that they use the term sustain, because it suggests not only like a creation or an existence of space, but like it's an action. Like when you sustain something, it means that it's going to continue for a long time, and not at super high energy, but that it like has longevity and that it has power. So I really like the choice of that word in particular. And then they talk about green and active systems. So not only green space, but systems that have action. One of the things that they do talk about, which might play into climate change or might play into the role that we can have here in Rochester, is the number of different natural resources that we have here. So mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is a city with a river. We have all these wonderful waterways. We have Lake Ontario and the Genesee River, which not only is a beautiful place and a nice place to hang out by, but it provides good, clean drinking water. which is something that maybe we would take advantage of, but that's actually not something that every city would have. Other things would be, we have things like urban forests. If we think about Cobbs Hill, that is actually a really old forest. And what do you think would be, for example, one benefit, Matt, of having an urban forest for the people around it?
I know personally that I derive a lot of enjoyment out of being able to go to a place like Cobbs Hill and to be able to hang out and sort of I don't know what the technical term would be, but it feels good for my soul to be able to be able to surround myself with plants and is it fauna?
Flora. Well, flora is like, the plants,
fauna is
and fauna
deers
the animals.
and birds and stuff. Flora. Yeah. Just from like a mental health aspect, I think that green spaces are very necessary in order for people to feel good.
I think Mary Oliver would really appreciate that you described the forest as being a place that's good for your soul.
Yeah.
I really like that you started with that, actually, that you started with the importance of green spaces on people's mental health. I know for me, like I grew up in a much smaller area than Rochester, and it's very natural for me to want to be outside and running around, not necessarily running, but to be outside and among plants and trees and have a little bit more space. And it's sometimes hard to be, even though Rochester's a small city, it sometimes feels a little bit stifling.
Sure.
And places like Cobbs Hill or other parks in the area are really wonderful escapes from that. The first thing that came to my mind is just like, where there's a lot of trees, there's a lot of clean air, as many of us, or hopefully all of us, learned in high school, trees take in carbon dioxide and create oxygen. So having those spaces is especially important for a city. Like having trees around is a way to make sure that there is air that
is clean.
We're actually safe to breathe.
Yeah.
So that's pretty special.
I would like to say real quick earlier when I was trying to think of the two words that the ROC 2034 report goes into. They were mitigation, which is actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions such as energy efficiency, renewable energy, efficient vehicles, biking, walking, etc., and adaptation, which would be actions to prepare for the impacts of climate change, such as stormwater management plans and permeable pavement or concrete. So this is all coming from the report. I'm just reading that off right now. Mm-hmm. They have a Venn diagram. And examples of mitigation and adaptation include green zoning, which we were just talking about, relying more on local food and urban agriculture, water efficiency and conservation, composting, and green infrastructure. So this was something that was very curious for me when I first read it, because I had never. We talk all about. So often the discussion around climate change seems to be centered on whether or not people are causing it. Mm-hmm. I feel like I have sort of missed out on the discussion surrounding what we can be doing about it, and I'd even never seen the sort of options at our disposal. Broken down like this between mitigation and adaptation. I was fascinated by that. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess offhand, I wouldn't necessarily know the difference between mitigation and adaptation. Again, they're just like words that one hears, and it's like, okay. But it's a really good point to think about what can we do. And not just as individuals, but as a community, like what can we do to slow or adapt to a changing climate? Were there any things in there that surprised you, Matt? Or that maybe seemed like so simple that like they were in there, but then you realized are actually things that people aren't doing?
Perhaps I in terms of being surprised, I learned from this report that just 2 years ago in 2017, the city of Rochester completed a new, quote, 2 megawatt solar field with 7,800 solar panels on a city-owned lot that formerly housed the Emerson Street landfill. I'm terrible with geography and with just like spatial awareness, so I'm not even sure where that is, but I had no idea that we even had such a large plot of solar panels in Rochester.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that either. I'm kind of curious as to what the power goes to.
Mm-hmm. Well, it says that in the report it provides energy for a number of city facilities, including City Hall.
Cool.
Yeah. So there's a timeline in this report that starts in 2007 and goes to 2017 and just sort of details some of the key steps that the city has taken in order to combat climate change. And like I said earlier, I feel like the conversation around climate change is so much centered on whether or not we should even be doing anything about it, or whether or not we're responsible as a species for it, that it's easy to drown out or to just not hear about the steps that are being taken, the steps that we can be taking. Mm-hmm. So I was surprised to see how, I guess, active we have been in the city in combating it. Most of it I had no idea of, such as in 2011, the city completed a GHG inventory for baseline year 2008 that set a goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from municipal operations by 20% below the 2008 baseline by 2020. I don't know how on track we are for that, but yeah, I really encourage all our listeners and anybody who lives in the city to take a look at this report, because it's very detailed, but it's also very accessible, which I think is marvelous.
I think one of the coolest things about it too is that it's not finalized. In fact, this is a working draft. It's like a really nicely put together working draft, but throughout it you'll see not only the information and the suggestions. I mean, it's broken down, as I mentioned, in a really nicely accessible way. You can download either a PDF or look at it on the web, but throughout it has comments from the public,
That's right.
which is like specific comments that the city has taken a look at and said, okay, this is what people are saying. But not only did they look at it and use it in their report, but they actually included them in their report. And you can still comment on it. There's a spot on the webpage where you can give your thoughts so that they can continue to develop this plan and continue to make sure that Rochester will be, I guess, ready. I don't even know if ready for climate change is right, because it's like climate change isn't something that's coming. It's
here.
Change happens around us, and it's already happening.
Yeah, but I think you brought up a really good point, Mary, in mentioning how the report really not only highlights comments from Rochesterians, but also provides a means in which to leave them. And I think that any sort of system that encourages the local population to participate is a good thing.
I would agree. And I think in this, it's one thing for us to look at this and say, hey, it's cool that the city is doing this, but let's maybe look at a couple of these points and see what we and our listeners may be able to do to help the city make this plan a reality. Because it can't just come, it's good for the city to encourage and have a significant role in making these things happen, but they can't necessarily force all the residents. So,
Right.
So some of the things that you mentioned in, let's say, in mitigation, include things like renewable energy, and obviously the city has started instating that, or maybe they did even before, but they have like the solar fields. We obviously have a huge resource of hydroelectric power with the river.
Right.
Other things are like efficient vehicles, waste reduction and diversion, so making more of an effort to recycle, even in your own home or in your own office building. Like if you notice that your office isn't recycling or making an effort to reduce your waste, that is something that you may be able to talk to other people and encourage. And of course, my favorites are in here, which is transit, biking, walking, and taking public transportation instead of maybe driving your car, or even just carpooling, just driving with 3 people in your car instead of just 1. And that is something that we have to work together to change.
Right.
You can't just expect that the city is going to have better public transportation, even though it would be nice. It takes a big amount of budget, and there have to be people who are going to ride as well. And so showing through consistent carpooling, or through trying to use the system when you can, or, finding alternatives rather than just waiting for the change to hopefully happen is really, really important.
I believe that the climate change reports that were released late last year specifically said that eventually we will have to completely eliminate greenhouse gas emissions if we want to preserve some semblance of what the planet is like right now. And so that means that either cars are going to have to change drastically to rely on more on clean energy, or we're just going to have to get rid of them. And I don't know that a lot of people are ready, especially in America, to make that sacrifice, because I feel that cars, especially having a personal vehicle, is very sort of a mark of independence and individuality, which is very important, I think, to a lot of American identity. Even though not to say that there aren't plenty of people out there who simply don't have the means to afford one. But, there are some sacrifices that we're going to have to make moving forward.
You mean we're going to have to kill the American dream?
Yes. Let it die.
It's interesting that you bring that up. I now, and you're saying that, I do remember that we had a caller a few weeks ago who was saying that exact thing. Like, not only to say, like, it's not enough to say we're going to have to reduce these things, but we have to understand that by increasing public transportation or increasing alternatives, that has to come at the expense of driving cars. And I mean, I personally am very okay with that.
Right.
I don't necessarily think that we need to get rid of cars. Obviously, it doesn't make sense for people in rural areas, to get a high-powered public transportation system, because where would it go?
Yeah.
So like there is a place for small vehicles. But I think especially in a city, even a smaller city, but like Rochester is a city that's very spread out, so it would actually make tons of sense to have a good network. The roads are congested all the time, and it's, people complain about traffic jams on their way to work, and having a system where you have things on tracks, for example, would make that much simpler, in fact. So it would be beneficial in a lot of ways, other than, an ego boost.
Yes. But real quick, we should remind listeners that they are listening to 100.9 WXIR, Extreme Listener Powered Radio. And this is Evidence of...
Sure. Ending on feeling pain in that song. Hopefully not. What was that song?
That was Venus by the band Television.
Oh, right. You mentioned Television. I wasn't sure if it was the name of the song or someone singing about television or what.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So we wanted to end today, and I guess we can quickly, I know we just gave a reminder, but again, this is Evidence of Design on 100.9 WXIR in Rochester. I'm actually not even going to encourage you to call in because I can't seem to figure out the phone. And so I'm really sorry to our caller who just got dropped, but definitely call next week or shoot us an email so we can take your questions off the air.
Or be on the show next week.
or join us.
But you can email us.
You can email us. We do have that open. So again, I'm sorry, but we're going to wrap up the last 10 minutes of our show by discussing. It's not really a hard pivot, actually. It's like kind of a soft pivot, yeah. But we actually wanted to bring in a short story. This was a story that I read in The Sun, which is a literary magazine, which one of the best parts about it is that there are no advertisements. So it's all just literature. In any case, this story is about witnessing change. And I know our show has been about change, but it's especially on what kind of change is happening around us and what we see and what we can do about it. So this story is called You Are Our Witness.
Apt.
Sorry?
Apt.
Very apt, yes. So it is a short story by Debbie Urbanski, who is an author from Central New York.
Syracuse?
I don't know exactly where, unfortunately, but the story does take place partially in Syracuse. Yeah. Yep. Rochester is also mentioned, which was kind of neat, and it was one of the first things that jumped out at me. But this is a story that I read and then could not stop thinking about because I was very intrigued. So I'll give you a short rundown, and then we can kind of think about how the types of change that we've been talking about today might play into a story like this, or how we can hopefully even avoid a story like this. So this story follows two women primarily, who are
a mother and daughter.
A mother and daughter, yes, Nan and Dana. And they are leaving Syracuse and living in a cabin in the woods because there has been a disease that spread that sterilized all of humanity.
A sort of global catastrophe.
Not even a global catastrophe, but an intentional global catastrophe. So in the story, it speculates that all of the governments of the world have worked together to create not even vaccine, but a disease that will sterilize all of humanity to stop humanity from procreating.
Overpopulating.
Yeah, but to completely stop them from procreating. So not only will it stop overpopulation, but eventually just everyone's going to die and there won't be humans left.
Right. As I remember it, and I've only actually heard you read this to me, Mary. But it sounded like in the story that perhaps originally the disease was only supposed to spread to so many people, and then it quickly perhaps got out of hand and everybody became infected.
I don't know. I guess I'd understood it to be everyone, but maybe that's something that would be interesting to
I just find it
ask the author about.
Yeah, I find it interesting that all of the world's governments would just decide to
Well, again,
kill
that's
off all of
that's
humanity.
speculated in the book. It doesn't say that for sure. And part of the fright, I guess, is that no one really knows for sure how this disease came to be. It's speculated that that governments work together because it is widespread. Mm-hmm. In any case, this woman and her daughter are both infected, and older people are able to leave the planet and live the rest of their existence in space. But younger people like Nan, who really is the main character of the story, are required to take jobs to sort of carry out the end of the world. So those jobs can be things like cleanup, or in Nan's case, she gets assigned to a very interesting position, which is where the title comes from, where she receives a bunch of notebooks and her role is to catalog, not even catalog, but just to write down regrowth.
Yeah.
And it specifies in here that she's only supposed to write down positive things. So anything negative that she finds, anything that's dead or anything that's suspicious, she isn't supposed to write down. The only things she's supposed to write down are positive growth. So new plants that are coming up around her. And no one may ever read these books. She's just supposed to live out the rest of her life, which probably won't be very long because she has a limited food supply, but she just is supposed to live out the rest of her life watching the world regrow without humanity. Mm-hmm. I found this story to be really disturbing, actually. Yeah. Like I said, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I think what was really interesting to me was this idea that humanity is almost separate from nature, and that humanity as a whole is the cause of destruction, and that by deleting it from the earth, that the earth will
find some sort of balance again.
Only be able to find it, yeah.
I think the most the part about the story that I enjoyed the most was its sort of, I guess, the context of the end of the world, which is oftentimes in movies, I think, or in any media, the end of the world is often sensationalized. Like, it's this huge event. It's, it's a nuclear war that wipes out the entire population in a matter of minutes, or it's an asteroid crashing into the Earth, or it's in a more fanciful way, it's like a zombie apocalypse or some kind. But this really imagines it as a quiet thing, a thing that happens very slowly over time, which I think is what will probably happen. It just seems more likely to me that, disease or famine will slowly just chip away at humanity until there's nothing left. And I found that particularly affecting.
I think it is also, I agree that it's interesting to see a different sort of decline. And I think since since reading this, we've sort of referred to it as a slow decline. And it actually, the author talks in the story about how people in this world imagined that the end of the world was going to come in one of those ways, in chaos and in terror and suddenly. Right. And instead, the disease spread suddenly. But other than that, it was very slow. And I guess my question for the last few minutes is, in thinking about this story and getting to the point where governments or people feel that they have to end humanity in order to save the world, can you see an alternative? And I know that's a big question, but can you see an alternative reality where it doesn't come to that, you know? Because I guess you mentioned that this is something that you could picture.
I think that all things will eventually end because all things have a beginning. Is this something that can be averted? I don't know. Should humanity even survive like the destruction of the earth? Like, if that's even possible, if someday we have a means to leave the planet behind and find a home elsewhere out there, whether it's one that's artificially created by us or if it's a different planet, I don't know. It seems so sad to me in some way that I don't even know how to explain to leave the earth behind, to use it all up and just depart from it. I don't think I would be able to if I had the option, which I doubt I will. But I'm an optimist. I think like probably 90% of the population is, and thinking that hopefully in some way we'll be able to turn this around. We'll be able to, if not reverse, at least stop a lot of the damage that we're doing. I would really like to see humanity graduate from taking advantage of the earth to becoming caretakers for it. But I don't know. We have to make some significant changes in order for that to happen. I
guess like some of the ones that we had mentioned earlier. In light of this story, I think that things like voting and climate change sometimes seems very small, but I do think it's really important for people like this author to imagine what an end could look like, to scare us and to force us into creating real change. At this point, as Matt said, all things must come to an end.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that includes our hour. Thank you so much for joining us here on 100.9 WXIR.